Welcome to the Elokus podcast. I'd like to welcome myself back. I was off the grid for like 2 weeks. And here we go back. Now we're going to start. We were holding by the sixth discourse in the great book, B'Shasha Hekdimu. This is going to be the first class in the sixth discourse called Kol Machlokes Shehu L'Shem Shamayim. In our original book, it's page 33, Lamed Gimel. I was traveling. It's just very hard to do when you're traveling. These classes take some thought and also the recording devices I don't have with me. So maybe I'll figure it out. But for now, I'm just feel bad that I was missing in action for 2 weeks, or maybe 3 weeks, something like that. But here we go. Hopefully we'll be able to stay consistent now for a little while, or for a long shot. Let's go for it. Okay, let's start the Maimer. The Maimer, as we know, of course, we're continuing. We're going to start after this. This is just a little heading, an intro to the discourse, and then we're going to start chapter 21 in the overall discourse, 56-72. Chapter 21 is where we're going to start, but this is still the intro of the Maimer, as we discussed many times. Then in the beginning of every discourse, the Rebbe connects, the Rebbe Rashab, the author, connects the discourse to the Torah portion of that Shabbos that he delivered this portion of the discourse. Remember that the main idea of this discourse is to develop and to take us through a very thorough understanding of godliness, and he builds in a very systematic way. But being that he wrote it, when the Rebbe wrote these manuscripts for himself, he wrote it unrelated to the weekly portion. It's only when he delivered it, he divided them. And then he would deliver it week after week on Shabbos, and he always found a connection from the weekly Torah portion to that subject that he was studying right now, which I find absolutely astounding. Sometimes the connection is very immediate. Sometimes you have to do a little bit. Sometimes, as we can see in last discourse, he did quite a lot of stretching, but still he was able to connect it. And once the connection is made, it's very clear how it's connected. So here we go. Kol Machlokes Shehu L'Shem. So the next Torah portion that we're starting now, that this discourse, the sixth discourse, is based on, is the Torah portion is Parshas Korach, which is the fifth Torah portion in the book of Numbers. So in Parshas Korach, we all know the Torah talks about the staged rebellion against Moshe in the desert by Moshe's cousin, the Levite Korach, who led an insurrection against Moshe. And they challenged Moshe's leadership. They demanded that they should be given the priestlyhood or the high priestlyhood, and so on and so forth. In the end, it didn't work out too well for them. They ended up 6 feet under. The whole entire group was swallowed in by the earth. Others were burnt in a fire. They offered the ketores, the incense, and their fire came out and consumed them all. And it was again clearly displayed or clearly proven from above that Moshe emes v'Torasa emes, Moshe is true and is. So there is a Mishnah in Tractate Avos, an Ethics of the Fathers. I think it is in the 5th chapter of Pirkei Avos, I think so. And over there, the Mishnah discusses the idea of Machlokes, disputes. Whenever there are disputes among sages or so on and so forth, and that there's different types of disputes, holy disputes and unholy disputes. The Mishnah says that unholy disputes end up tanking, which means that those that are engaged, or at least the one party that is engaged, or maybe both parties that are fighting for their own self-interest, everybody ends up losing. It doesn't stand. And a dispute that is a dispute based in holiness, and therefore it's a positive dispute. So such a dispute ends has a continuity. That's what the Mishnah says. Let's read it inside. Kol machlokes shushem l'shem shamayim. Every argument, every dispute, or machlokes sometimes can be seen, every fight that is l'shem shamayim, that is for the sake, literally translated, it means for the name of heaven, which means it's for a higher altruistic motive. It's not for personal power, for personal triumph or whatever, in order to assert oneself, but rather it is for a greater, one is fighting for something because it deserves to be fought for, because it is a good thing, it is the right thing. Sometimes it doesn't always work out to be nice. Niceness is a nice thing, but sometimes you have to put your foot down and fight the fight. So the Mishnah is saying that every machlokes, every fight that is l'shem shamayim, it is for a higher purpose, for the sake of God, for the sake of heaven. So if it is kayim, in the end, it's going to end up that it's going to withstand. That means that if both sides are fighting for the right cause, both are going to be validated, and both sides are going to last. And if it's not l'shem shamayim, then the whole thing will fizzle out, and it will end. It will become batal. It will be nullified. So kol machlokes l'shem shamayim sefer l'skayim. Every machlokas, every fight that is for a higher purpose, it's going to in the end endure. Oh, that was the word I'm looking for. It's going to endure. And any argument that is not for a higher purpose, but it's based on to perpetuate one's own existence, it's not going to endure. What is considered then the Mishnah gives an example. What is an example of a machlokes, of a fight that is l'shem shamayim for the proper purpose? It's like the arguments that we find in the sages between Hillel and Shammai. Okay, the school of Hillel, the school of Shammai, we already are familiar with that, as we learned earlier about these two schools. So they argue in Torah. One sees it one way, the other sees it the other way. We learned earlier Hillel has a more chesed approach, and therefore always more lenient. Chesed means kindness, so therefore it's always more lenient. Shammai has a more gevura approach, and therefore they're usually more stringent, and they argue their way through the Torah. And this is going to endure because both opinions have a continuity. Hillel, we know, of course, continues, because we know that we follow whenever there's an argument between Hillel and Shammai, most of the cases, Hillel is the one who triumphs, and the Jewish people follow the rulings of Hillel, the school of Hillel, Hillel himself or his students. And the questions people ask, so what's with Shammai? Shammai seems that his opinions, and Shammai definitely didn't just voice their opinion just in order to say the opposite of Hillel. They also meant it fighting for the truth. So it's explained that in the days of Mashiach, Shammai's opinion is going to make a comeback. So you see, it's going to have an endurance. Then we have to obviously ask the question, but then Hillel would seem not to endure. Okay. So maybe Hillel will also have a continuity in the time of Mashiach. However it is. But what we're saying is that it endures, it continues because it's truth. L'skaya. But what is she'eino l'shem shamayim? What is considered a machlokes? A fight that is not for pure intentions, not for a higher purpose. So machlokas Korach va'ados. This was the fight instigated by Korach and his assembly, and that was not for a higher purpose. It was for personal gain. It was for their own egos. Or they wanted to be honored for their own personal gains. And therefore, what happens to it? There's no continuity to Korach, other than that we read about him in the Torah, that he went deep into the earth, and that's it. Tzarech lahav, we need to understand. But here we need to understand. The Rebbe is now asking the question. Why is it a good thing that the argument is going to endure? Isn't arguments generally a negative thing? So here we're saying, well, if you want the fight should last forever, in other words, you never want to have a ceasefire. You want to have the war should go on forever and ever. So make sure that it should be for a proper cause. It should be for a higher purpose. Okay, but if it's for but who wants a war to last forever? What's the benefit or what's the gain of a enduring fight? Which would seem to say that if you have pure motivation in your fight, then it's going to last forever. But that's not a good thing. That's the question. What is the advantage that it's going to endure? The general idea of a machlokes is not a mile, it's not a quality. And if so, what does it mean machlokes for a higher purpose? That the quality of this is just that it's going to endure. We also need to understand another point. You look, you see that there's a certain seemingly inconsistency in the verbiage of the verse, of the Mishnah. When it comes to the machlokes, that is l'shem shamayim, that is for the proper purpose, then it mentions both arguers, both teams, Hillel and Shammai. But when it mentions the machlokes, that's not l'shem shamayim. It mentions Korach. It doesn't say Korach Moshe, who was fighting. Korach and Moshe were arguing. Or Korach and his assembly against Moshe and Aaron. But over here, it doesn't say that. It says, the Machlokes Korach v'Adasai. This is the Machlokes of Korach and his assembly, which are both on one side of the aisle. Doesn't mention the other contestant. When it mentions Hillel and Shammai, it mentions both sides that are opposing each other. When it comes to the machlokes, that is not for a higher purpose. It mentions only one side, Korach and his assembly. And he doesn't mention Moshe. Now, a simple explanation to that is obvious. Moshe wasn't fighting. But Moshe was going about doing his business, what God commanded him to do, setting up the Jewish people in accordance to God's instructions. Who gets to do what? Setting up the Mishkan, setting up the tabernacle, who goes to work in the Holy Temple. And Aaron is chosen by God. And Korach had a problem with it. And Korach comes in and tries to challenge it. So this is not a fight between Moshe and Korach. It's a fight of Korach and his assembly, who are rabble rousers, who are troublemakers, and they're making trouble. It's not like you say that we presented a question and there are two opposite opinions. It didn't start that way. Then, like by Hillel and Shammai, in the Beis HaMedrash, in the study hall, a question was presented. A shaila came. A shaila means a question, a halachic question was presented. And Hillel voiced his understanding of how this should be resolved according to the Torah, what should be the Torah solution. And Shammai voiced his opinion. Then you have that they're arguing from the get-go. But over here, it's not that case. Moshe is doing what he's doing, and Korach comes to challenge him. So you can't call it a fight between Moshe and Korach. It's just a fight from Korach and his assembly against Moshe. V'gam. And the second reason why we can answer on a simple level why Moshe is not mentioned, because we wouldn't, God forbid, be able to say that the fight that is not l'shem shamayim, not for a pure motive, would be an argument between Korach and Moshe, God forbid. Korach had own personal agendas and desires for his own honor, but Moshe had no personal vendetta over here. Moshe had no personal self invested in this. Moshe was acting solely for the truth, for God's sake. So you couldn't say on Moshe and put him under the umbrella, God forbid, of a machlokes shalol l'shem shamayim, of an argument or a fight that is not for a heavenly purpose. By Moshe, it was l'shem shamayim. So you can't lump Moshe into the statement of Shaloi L'Shem Shamayim, is what the Mishnah wants to say, that a machlokes, a fight that is not for a higher purpose, ends up that it doesn't endure. Okay, that you can answer on the simple level, but we still need to understand Mao Inyan. What is the deeper reason? The Machlokes the L'Shem Shamayim. When you have a Machlokes, an argument for a higher purpose, Yeshneit Stadim, you have two sides of the aisle. You have two opinions. You have two forces, two clashing forces. And when there is a Machlokes that's not for the heavenly sake, if you notice when you read the Mishnah that the Machlokes that is L'Shem Shamayim has two arguing two opponents that are coming onto the debate table, and when it comes to Machlokes that's not L'Shem Shamayim, there's only one side. As the Mishnah is implying, that is only Korach. There's only one side. Reuven calls that, and remember, this wasn't that we're now going to answer these questions, but rather, this is just the opening entry into the discourse, in which we're going to continue the themes that we were discussing earlier, and eventually we're going to get back to it as we close the discourse in a whole bunch of classes. Reuven calls that to understand all of this. Yesh lahagdim. We first preface Mashnes Bar Le'el. This to explained earlier, the Meshoyde Shumakar Hakav Kamoshu Ba'erin Soiv, that in the root and in the source of the Kav, which is the thread of light, as it is in the Orin Sov, Shalifnei Tzimtzum, that's before the Tzimtzum. Remember, the whole themes that we were developing over here is that there is something called Or Pnimi, and Or Pnimi goes all the way through. The first idea of Or Pnimi is the lights that go into vessels, the oiros of the sphirot of the attributes. Earlier than that, these are all part of the Kav, which the Kav is that thread of light that is meant eventually to splinter into lights that go into vessels. It's the internal light that vivifies all of the worlds, all of reality. But even that light has its roots before the Tzimtzum. And when that light is rooted before the Tzimtzum in the Orin Saiv, we said over there is already a faint beginning of 10 spheres, and they're called Esa spheres Agnuzais b'matzilon. These are the 10 hidden spheres in their matzel, in their emanator. However, we explained at great length in the last discourse number 5, that they exist in a very non-existent level in their source, and that's why all 10 of them can all dwell together, and they don't contradict each other, and they're all so one with each other. That's what we were learning in the last time. So he's going to further elucidate, and he's going to ask some questions to give us a much better understanding in this level. Then in the root and the source of the kav, as it is in the Orin Sof and the infinite light before the tzimtzum. There's also 10 spheres. And Esa spheres agnuzais b'matzilon, and they are the 10 spheres that are hidden in their emanator. And we explain that these 10 spheres that are hidden have arvos. They are in a state of mixed one with the other. This achdus and unified. The spheres are not yet distinguishable in a specific manner. But rather, all of them are in a state of integration one with the other. And that is mitzad heder mitziyasa. And that's because they don't yet exist in a state of existence. You can't say that the spheres is that there's an existence of kindness, there's an existence of discipline, and so on and so forth. And they are in a state of simplicity. Simplicity meaning undefined and pre-colorization. That's why they're in a state of being mixed and unified, irritable one to the other, because they don't yet have a presence of their own parameters and definitions that they should clash one with each other. Like we discussed, how fire and water can sit together in an expressed fire and water. Like we had these examples earlier, and we learned how in Hillel and Shammai's ideas are still sit together in Shmai and Avtalya. Remember, we learned Shmai and Avtalya in the Rebbe of Hillel and Shammai, where by Shemayin of Talia they didn't yet have the Machlokes, they didn't yet have the vision of Hillel and Shammai, and in that one teaching it contains both ideas. The Shammai's understanding of it and the Hillel's understanding of it are both the Chesed and the Gevura on this variations of it were both in one teaching of Shemayin of Talia. Okay, however, we need to understand. Now we begin chapter 21. So this was the introduction. Now he starts chapter 21. And we still need to understand. How do we kind of reconcile these two things together? Basically, his question to be a simple question. How do we call them 10 if they're still undefined? If they're undefined, then there's just, if we say they're pashut means without definition. If they're not if they're without definition, so how are they 10? What differentiates one from the other? Then they're one. How do you say there's no kalim of it, there's no vessels, and we're saying the lights are pure lights? So how does it work? How do we say that they are in a state of pshitas, in a state of simplicity? In the end, there are 10 spheres. So what if there's 10, it means you count one, and this is different than the other one, or else it would be the same light as the other one. It means that it has a slight different tinge. This light is not exactly the same color. I was just now I had the merit, my son, thank God, I get a mazel tov, I had a grandson. And this was a special treat for us because my son is now a shliach, a Chabad emissary in Fairbanks, Alaska. And he and my wonderful daughter-in-law had a baby, their second child, and we went, and it was a boy, and we went there for the bris. So just the other night, I went out far out, so like about an hour and a half away from Fairbanks, far as north. It was freezing cold. In any case, the Northern Lights, there was an aurora night, just a spectacular display. It's one of the strongest nights. It was just stunning. So when I'm looking up and I'm seeing these lights and they're dancing and they're very powerful in the sky, but I didn't see them so much as colors. It's interesting. I saw just mainly white. Like you could see, it's not clouds. It's like really strong light in this, like beams of light, and it comes in all different shapes. But when we took pictures of it, the pictures were stunningly colorful. That means which means that my physical eye did not pick up on the color of it. The color is subtle, but when you put to it a camera, a lens, and you take a picture, it was a very beautiful green, astounding green. So you see the light has a different color. And you know that in the aurora lights, sometimes they are red, sometimes they're green, they could be purple, I think, different colors. I got to see the green. But again, I only got to see the green looking through the camera. When you're looking like maybe very, very slightly, you can see a little bit of a greenish tinge to it. So, okay. So the lights are different when they're different colors. But I guess when you're looking without the lens, you're seeing it more in a pshitustic state. But even then, if I'm looking at a pshitus, because my eye is not sharp enough, I guess, to be able to pick up on the colorization of it, and maybe through the bend of the camera lens somehow brings out more a hidden color that's in it. But at least there's a hidden color there that would differentiate one color from the other color. But if we're saying over here that the lights are pashut, that the chesed is not chesed and the gevura is not gevura in the order that's before the tzimtzum, so then why are they 10? That's the question. If we say that what the idea that we spoke about in last class, in the last mimer, that they're so subtle, they're very, very subtle, and they can sit together. No, that you can say that they're not pashut. You're not going to say that they're pashut. Pashut meaning just absolutely simple and without any definition. They are already mitsuyarim. The opposite of pshitus means mitsuyarim. They have already a tziyar. They have already a form. It's just what we can argue and say that the form is so benign. It is so subtle that they're not yet clashing. It's too soft for them to clash. It's like soft colors. You can put them together because they're very soft colors. We can say that the the state and the essence sphere secondus is because they're just the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. They're not pronounced enough that they should go at each other. They should be opposites. That the Indian afeichiyus. We can say that the oppositeness of fire and water and the like, is in the expansion and in the formation of something. But the essence of it. But the essence of these of a light that is not yet in a revealed state, we can say that they're not provoking each other. They're not opposite of each other. Therefore, is the essence. In other words, what we're doing is we're tracing the sphera, the attribute. We're going deeper than its expression. The expression of the spheras make them far more defined. And then the colors that they have are contradictory one to each other. They will clash. But when you get to the essence of them, over there, they're still so refined that they don't clash. But they're still different. It's the essence of fire is still fire, and the essence of water is still water. It's just not clashing with each other. But you're not going to say that the essence, the fire, and the water is the same thing. It's not. This is fire and this is water. But here, what we're trying to say is, if we say they're pashut, which means that the 10 spheres are not spheres. They're pashut, means they have no tzir at all. They have no image at all. Or else, if they have already an image, they're not pashut. They're not simple. But if they're completely simple, then how are they 10? That's the question. Okay, atzmi is a sphere, the essence of the attributes as they are, when they haven't been drawn forth, they're not opposites, and they can live together. How can we say that they are in a state of pshitus? We're saying, why do they get along? We're saying not because they're subtle. We're saying because they're pashut. And then they are one. If they are 10, how can you say that they are pashut? And we're saying eser v'loy tisha, and specific number 10, and not if it's pashut, then it can be a billion. Ain't stuff. You call it whatever you want. If it has no definition yet, so it can be a source for anything. It's Ein Sof Sfirot. No, you're saying it's only 10. So that means that only 10 means it's these 10 powers. So it's not pashut. It's not totally clean. You're even giving it names. Not only you're saying it's 10 potentials, I don't know what, but you're actually labeling what those 10 are. You're saying it's chachma, wisdom, v'chesed, and kindness. However you're only going to define it, you're already speaking of chachma and chesed. So that's already a sphere. So this is already a limitation. And hagbala and limitation and pshitus and simplicity are two opposites. So how do we reconcile these two elements in the 10 spheres hagnuzais, in which we will argue that they are really pashut, at the same time there are 10? And that he's going to say, the idea is, but we're going to leave that as Hashem for tomorrow's class.